Part 1 first, the removal. Here's a link to it.
With Kevin, the Pepe mechanic, he's the one that rebuilt this. He brought the part back up to Weehype. I went over and picked it up. I'm just getting it out of the pickup, bringing it back in the shop, getting ready to put it in. Pretty much everything you see there is new, except for the flat disc the brake is on.
From where to where?
Inside from about right here into here, this part and this part, and down in there, and everything that's behind that. Got my wedge out. This is the opposite side. Looks like it has been changed. I'm sure that's a new housing, but I decided as long as I had it there and sitting apart, I was going to take it apart so I could look inside and make sure there wasn't anything bad on this side. Pretty much everything you see in this parts picture had to be replaced. The housing itself had a little bit of scarring on it. It wasn't too bad. But the pins, thrust washers, all the bearings that go inside the 3 round gears all had to be replaced. Plus the ring gear that the pinion Planetary goes into on the housing also had to be replaced, and it didn't have the 3 dowel slots on the outside of it to lock it to the housing, so it had to be sent to a machine shop, and they had to cut out the part of that where the dowels go so that it lined up right. Okay, we got a couple bolts started. Hold it up there. Main thing we have to look for is that the dowel pins are close to the holes in this housing and that the gasket is away from everything and not going to get pinched. And get as many bolts started as we can. Okay, I think that started the dowel pins. So I use this little 3/4 drive impact, start sucking a few of the bolts up. 3/8 drive. And the battery's dead. Get this arm back on. There we got an Allen head set screw on here. It holds that arm in place. I'm gonna have to get off. Torque wrench out, torque all these bolts to 50 pounds. That man will go to 60. Get a book out, check. 60 pounds on those bolts didn't seem like quite enough. I might have to come back and do them just a little bit more. Other than that, got the shifter to put on, emergency brake bracket, and another housing on the front. 2 brake lines, 2 hoses. Getting ready to get the hoist set up over the top of the tractor and the come-alongs down. So. Yeah, the one thing I gotta watch out for when I'm putting the crane into place is there's a truss right straight above that light, and I got the backhoe parked almost exactly right under it, so if I go too high I'm going to break it with the crane. Okay, we got the rear end on the Dolly, got the hydraulic jack under the transmission front end, which is the heaviest part, so it doesn't tip forward. And we're getting the come-alongs hooked up to the axle, getting ready to raise it up. I was lifting up the front of the transaxle to make the rear end was going up even, and it was circled the fitting on the back of the axle that I broke off on that bracket. Electrical plug-ins here are for the four-wheel drive. Two of them, they need to be plugged in. Okay, I'm getting up high enough at the rear end now that I have to get inside and check and make sure that that shifting bracket that bolts onto the transmission is in front of the transmission, towards the front of the tractor and not behind it. Because if it is behind it, you can't get it forward. You have to drop the rear end back down and pull it forward and then bring the rear end up. Also check and make sure the brake lines, no wires are catching anywhere. Plus I'm letting it down a little bit with the outriggers. You can see I still have the jacks underneath the back end. They were for safety in case something gave. It would only go down that far. Yeah, I didn't have enough throw on the jack, so I had to get a block to put underneath it so I could raise the front end up, keep even with the back end. I want to make sure when you get this high, as you watch that pipe that is sticking out of the back of the rear end up high, both coming in and out, because you catch it on that brace that goes across on the backhoe bracket. Break it off, and then you got all kinds of trouble. I'm taking a couple of chains, one for each side, and I'm throwing across the frame and underneath the axle and tightening it up just for safety in case something happens. The rear end won't go straight down all the way to the ground. It will hang on the frame itself. I'm getting up close enough now. I'm trying to line up the bolts. You don't want to pull the rear end up tight to the frame. You want to leave it just a little bit loose. And you have the plate and the 4 bolts that go underneath each side. I just put them up and put them loose, and then I worked the rear end around to where it was all lined up where it was supposed to be, and checked the top to make sure everything was in the right place before I sucked the bolts down tight. Once the axle is lifted up into place, all you have is 4 bolts here with this plate on the bottom. The bolts run up through, bolts it down there. Same thing on the other side, just don't have quite as much room. 4 bolts. Plate on the bottom holds it up, and that's all that holds the rear end in. Okay, I'm back up on top. The bracket I was talking about that holds the linkage. You can see the bolt there. It's kind of triangular shaped. The other bolts are back underneath. To tighten it down, and we just have to make sure that thing is sitting in front of the transmission. These are the 2 brake lines. One thing I didn't know is there's grease fittings right here on the end for this axle. Bearing right here.